The set was quiet, too quiet for a live political show airing coast to coast. Red lights blinked from the cameras overhead. The moderator shuffled her cue cards nervously, trying to maintain a smile. But even she could feel it, the air had changed. It was supposed to be a conversation about liberty, about the enduring promise of America and what it meant in 2025. But the tension between Senator JD Vance and Representative Jasmine Crockett had turned the segment into something far more raw and far less rehearsed. JD Vance leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "Congresswoman," he said, eyes narrowing, "you talk about freedom as if it's something being withheld. From who exactly? You sit on the Oversight Committee. You have a national platform. No one's silencing you." Across the table, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She adjusted her blazer calmly, her eyes locking onto his. "I speak of freedom not as a luxury I possess," she replied, "but as a promise too many Americans are still waiting for, especially the ones who look like me." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy like a held breath. JD smirked faintly, tapping his pen on the desk. "Look, I respect your service," he said, the tone almost dismissive. "But this narrative, this constant victimhood, it's exhausting. At some point, don't we have to move on?" Jasmine blinked once. Slowly. "I don't think the families of those incarcerated for crimes others got probation for have moved on," she said, her voice level. "I don't think a mother watching her son get pulled over for the color of his skin has moved on. And I know for damn sure my grandmother, who was denied the right to vote until she was nearly 40, never felt like freedom just arrived." The camera cut to the audience. Some leaned forward. Others shifted uncomfortably. But no one looked away. Then JD muttered something, not to her, not to the mic, but under his breath. A whisper meant only for himself. Or so he thought. "Maybe you'd feel more at home back in the zoo." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The boom mic caught every syllable. And Jasmine heard it, clear as day. The moderator froze. So did the room. Jasmine didn't react right away. Her fingers stayed clasped on the table. Her face didn't twitch. It was the kind of silence that comes before an earthquake. She inhaled. Then, with a calm so precise it felt like a scalpel, she leaned slightly toward the mic. "You know, Senator," she said slowly, "when I was little, my mother told me that one day, a man would say something so ignorant, so venomous, that the room would go quiet and I'd be tempted to scream. But she also said, never let them drag you out of your name. Never give them that power." The studio was still. Not angry. Not chaotic. Just still. "I am a congresswoman," she said. "Elected by the people. A lawyer. A daughter of civil rights fighters. I've read the Constitution in courtrooms that didn't expect me to win. I've stood up for people who couldn't afford a voice. And I'm not here to prove I belong. I'm here to remind you that freedom isn't yours to grant." JD Vance shifted, suddenly aware of how quiet it had become. Outside the studio, the clip would go viral in hours. But inside, in that breathless moment, something bigger was happening. It wasn't about the insult. It was about the silence that followed, and the woman who filled it with dignity, not rage. The moderator finally found her voice. "Let's, take a quick moment to reset," she stammered, trying to regain control of the live segment. But it was too late. The narrative had shifted, and the audience, both in the studio and watching at home, was locked in. JD Vance didn't apologize. He didn't even look remorseful. Instead, he leaned back, his jaw tight, trying to find a foothold in a conversation that had spiraled beyond soundbites and strategy. "You're twisting this," he said, voice firm but slightly more measured now. "I didn't mean it like that." Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. The beauty of a microphone, Senator, is that it doesn't interpret. It just amplifies. It caught your words exactly as you said them. For a moment, JD looked as though he wanted to respond, to reframe, to deflect, but something in the way the room had stilled warned him against it. The moderator turned to Jasmine. "Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to continue?" Jasmine nodded. Her voice was steady, but not cold. "Yes, because this is precisely the kind of moment we need to examine." She turned toward the camera, not to JD, not to the host, but directly to the people watching. "We throw around the word freedom like it's air, something we all breathe equally. But the truth is, many of us are still gasping for it. Not because we don't believe in America, but because America doesn't always believe in us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "I'm not here to make you comfortable," she continued. "I'm here to remind you that freedom isn't just about owning a gun or refusing a vaccine. It's about walking through a grocery store without being followed. It's about being pulled over and not wondering if you'll survive the traffic stop. It's about sitting in a room like this and not being reduced to an animal when you disagree with a colleague. JD Vance sat stiffly, eyes narrowed but silent. Jasmine glanced at him, then back to the audience. "You want to talk about exhaustion, Senator?" she asked. "Try waking up every day knowing that your very presence challenges someone's sense of belonging. Try teaching your children to be confident and proud, while also teaching them how not to be killed." Her voice caught, not from weakness but from weight. This isn't about hurt feelings. This is about history. It's about power. It's about who gets to define America and who's always being asked to defend their place in it. The moderator leaned in, sensing the weight of the moment. "And yet," Jasmine added, her tone softening, "I'm not angry. Not today. I'm just tired of pretending this kind of remark is new. It isn't. It's as old as every poll tax, every whites-only sign, every school that never got funded because of who lived in the neighborhood." She let the silence breathe. "Today you gave me an ugly reminder of why I fight the way I do. And ironically, I thank you for it. Because it means I'm exactly where I need to be." The audience broke into applause, tentative at first, then louder. JD Vance shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable, but still didn't speak. The moderator tried to pivot. "Let's open the floor to final thoughts." But the tone had changed. This was no longer a debate. It was a reckoning. The applause had ended, but the room still pulsed with tension. The moderator, attempting composure, nodded toward JD Vance. "Senator, you may offer a closing thought." He hesitated, something rare for him. JD Vance had built his career on quick responses and calculated rhetoric. But this time, every word would land like glass on concrete. He leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, fingers clasped together. "I didn't come here to offend anyone," he began, voice subdued. "And I didn't expect this conversation to become personal." The crowd watched, wary. "I was raised to speak my mind," he continued. "But I'll admit that sometimes, what's meant as blunt honesty can be damaging in ways I didn't understand until today." Jasmine Crockett looked at him, not forgiving, not enraged, just observant. JD wasn't asking for grace. And she wasn't offering it. "I can't undo what I said," JD admitted. "But I can take responsibility for it. And I can say that if any young person watching this felt dehumanized by my words, I failed in more ways than one. It wasn't a perfect apology. But it was more than most had expected." The moderator stepped in again, her tone gentler. "Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to respond?" Jasmine's fingers tapped softly against her notes before she looked up. "Senator," she said, "I wasn't waiting for an apology. And I'm not sure one would fix what we all heard. But I appreciate the acknowledgement. Because accountability doesn't always look like perfection. Sometimes it just looks like recognition." She paused. "Freedom is uncomfortable. It demands that we confront things about ourselves we'd rather ignore. That we grow when it's easier to dig in. You could have doubled down. You didn't. That matters." JD Vance gave a small nod, not victory, not defeat. Just understanding. The studio fell into a thoughtful stillness. No cheers. No boos. Just the soft hum of something rarely felt on live television. Human complexity. Then, slowly, Jasmine turned to the moderator. "Can I say one last thing?" "Of course." Jasmine leaned into the mic again, but this time her voice was calm, not measured like before, but genuine. "There are people watching right now who've been hurt, by words like those, by systems that make them feel invisible, by moments that echo centuries of pain. But I want you to know, silence isn't your only option. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to stand in truth." She looked straight into the lens. "And if you do, even your stillness will move the world." A hush swept through the studio. Not awkward, not strained, just reverent. The show began to wrap. Music faded in. The panel thanked each other and rose from their seats. But before the credits rolled, something unscripted happened. JD Vance extended his hand across the table. Not as a politician, not as a senator, as a man who had said something ugly, and knew it. Jasmine looked at it. There was no smile, no show of forgiveness. But she reached out and shook it. Just long enough to remind everyone watching that grace isn't submission, and truth isn't always loud. As they stood there, side by side for a brief, breathless second, the camera panned slowly out, capturing not just two lawmakers, but a nation still learning how to speak, how to listen, and most of all, how to heal. In the end, it wasn't just a clash of ideologies, It was a moment of awakening. Jasmine Crockett and JD Vance, though worlds apart, reminded the nation of something greater than politics: the need to listen. Their fiery exchange echoed far beyond the studio walls, igniting a national conversation about truth, justice, and what it means to be free. As the crowd quieted and the credits rolled, one truth stood firm: democracy thrives not when voices agree, but when they are brave enough to challenge and be challenged. That night, courage took the mic, and America listened.